Welcome to Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I'll be covering every studio song the band has recorded and every bonus track that I can find. Each week we'll go over a new song from the beginning to where they are currently, and as they keep adding albums, I'll keep adding shows. Let the deep dive party begin.
In the magic garden, some were singing, some were dancing.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I, of course, am your host, Scott Haskin, here with another song to start your week off. Heapy Monday, folks. We're gonna kick it off right, and we're gonna do a little bit of gratitude before we start the song. But the song that we're talking about today is called Step by Step. No, I am not talking about the 90s television show, although that was a good show. I am talking about the Uriah Heep song from the album Different World. But before I start talking about the song I was talking about, I want to talk to you about something else. I want to talk to you guys about our wonderful patrons of this show. They've all signed up for the Patreon account and donate monthly to help keep the cost of the show in control, because I'm pretty out of control at this point. And I'm going to tell you who they are. Starting at the $5 Easy Living tier, we have Brad D. and Kenny Wymore. At the $3 The Wizard tier, we have William Rose, Frank Teelgaard Mortensen, Goran Eriksson, and Peter Voss. And at the $1 Traveler in Time tier, we have the No Social Distancing Needed Airtight Gravesite. Thank you guys very much. It really helps, and I really appreciate it. And it means a lot to me that the show means enough to you to want to do that. And I'd also like to thank the people that have left reviews on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, or any other place. I see them if they're on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. I don't see them if they're in a lot of other places. If you are leaving comments on Podbean, I do see those. I think I've responded to all of those that I've received so far, but thank you all very much. These podcasts that have become so important to people, especially during the pandemic, have certainly been growing because of word of mouth. That is the greatest gift that you can give the show, is to let people know about it. And the reviews are certainly important, and just, sharing the posts. And as Dave White does, the social media director of Uriah Heep, powerhouse of the website, if you will, he runs the Uriah-Heep.com website as well as the Mick Box website, and does an amazing job at both of those. They're huge. It's a lot of work. And on top of that, the guy gets up in the middle of the night, listens to the show, and shares it on the social media sites, Twitter and also Facebook. And that is unbelievably amazing. Thank you, Dave. I don't mind people waking up with me, but it's kind of weird to think that, some people start their day with this show. Some people don't listen to it until the end of the day. And some people listen, whenever. It's a really weird thing to think that you're touching people's lives at all different times of the day or night. Really kind of cool, though, when you think about it. I think it's really just pretty cool that I can sit here and record this show in my studio and broadcast it out to people, and you guys can listen to it anytime you want. We have such great advantages in technology in the times that we live in. And I really wonder where it's going to go from here. I part of it scares me, but there are a couple other people I want to thank. Scott Lazinski, who has done an amazing job with the show logo, both the day and the night version. And of course, my friends over at Audionamics. Without them, I would not do a podcast without Instant Dialogue Cleaner, or IDC, one of their awesome products. They also have another one that splits audio, music you can use to, kind of learn solos, hear how parts are played. You can take the vocals out and listen to them. You can listen to the song without the vocals. And it's a really amazing technology, and that's called Extract Stems. You guys should check that out as well, especially if you're a musician and you really want to hear a part, what somebody's playing, and you don't want all the other sounds in it. It does a pretty efficient job. I mean, nothing is perfect unless you have the original masters. You're not going to take out 100% of anything, but it's pretty amazing stuff. So check that out, especially if you're a student. And of course, before we get into the song, I have to thank my brothers at the Deep Dive Podcast Network. We have Nate and John at the Deep Purple Podcast, my gateway drug into the Deep Dive Network. We have the Simple Man at Skinner Reconsidered, Terry T-Bone Mathley at T-Bone's Prime Cuts on the other side. We have Rye at Sabbath's Bloody Podcast, Paul, Joe, and David at the In the Lap of the Pods podcast. We have Andy and Matt at Hawk Binge, Eric and Jonathan at Maiden A to Z Pod. We have Daniel and Josh at Diary of the Madmen, the ultimate Aussie podcast. We have Ben and Sam at Universally Speaking, the Red Hot Chili Peppers podcast. I thought that was going to be hard to say, but it actually wasn't. And we have George and Tom at the Metal Gods podcast, which is a podcast on Judas Priest. We also have my buddy Brandon over at the Metallicast podcast. And you got to check out gottahear'emall.com, where you get some very fascinating information on bands like Deep Purple and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And of course, Ace on Music. Check that out on Stitcher and YouTube, where we learn a lot of things about the music industry that, honestly, as long as I've been working in the industry, I didn't know some of this stuff. And it's pretty amazing, very detailed and thoughtful insight coming from Ace and his companions on that show. So those are plenty of things that you should check out, not until you're done listening to this episode, of course, but that could fill your day with things to enjoy. So speaking of things to enjoy, how about we enjoy some Step by Step by Uriah Heep? Well, a little bit of a cool note bend in that riff from Mick. I like that riff. It's got a good feel to it, got some good motion, and the guitar sounds really nice in there. Again, not a lot of bottom end in it, but as we hear when the bass and drums come in, they really mix together well. And, if a guitar is playing on its own, sometimes it's nice to have that full range of sound. But if you're going to have the backing of the rest of the band, then you don't have to have a guitar that has so much of the lower tones, because the band is going to cover that, because you've got a bass guitar to do the low tone sound, and you got a bass drum, you got toms, which are mostly in the low register. So, you can go that route and it'll sound fine. The first few notes are always a little bit weird because you don't have that, but as soon as the band kicks in, it's there. I can say that I like that real powerful note that we're hearing from Trevor on bass. Just that one simple note at the end of the drum fill from Lee Kerslake. Really nice lead in. Well, I really like the sound of the drums. The kick is nice and punchy. The snare's got some good bottom end to it, but I think they're just a little bit too loud in comparison to the rest of the instruments, especially the vocal. The snare should not be blocking out the vocal at all. And I'm hearing they're a little bit louder than Bernie's singing. So for me, I would not actually, I might drop the drums back just a little bit, but I would probably boost up Bernie a little bit more, because I think he's in a good line with the rest of the instruments. It's just the drums that seem to be a little too loud right now. Just, for my taste. Great long sustained note from Bernie, but do you listen to how different Mick's guitar sounds now as opposed to the way that it did in the very beginning of the song when he was playing by himself? Now he's got the backing of the band. The guitar tone actually sounds richer than it did at the beginning when he was playing alone. And that's why I said, you don't always have to have a full-bodied guitar sound. You have to think about what's being added to the song overall and how that's going to affect the tone and how your tone is going to affect the overall. Sometimes when you have a predominant bass player and you also have, a really heavy guitar, sometimes it can get muddy with too much low end. So I actually like the sound of this right now. I think it sounds really good, and love this, just the solidarity in the band here. This is really tight played. Hearing some really nice stuff from Phil on the organ. There's a nice vibrato to the organ. But that organ, that pitch that EQ really cuts through nicely, and it stands out. It makes it heard, because up until that point where he started doing this, I hadn't heard a lot in the way of keyboards in the song. So I'm really glad to hear this, and it really adds a nice impact, I think, to what we're hearing. I have to say on this album, one thing that I found very interesting is the way that they do their transitions. There's a lot of that kind of stuff, a measure or two that just really throws you off, but then brings you right back into the song. And that is not always the easiest to create. And they've done a great job on this album, especially making that happen. I normally don't like to compare people that much, because I really want, each individual should be taken as they are. But one thing I've noticed that's very similar between Bernie and John Lawton is that both of them just sang with force very consistently. They drop back when they need to, if they're doing something a little lighter or a ballad or a backing vocal, but both of them really just bring a lot of power to everything they do. And I think for Bernie's voice, because he's just got some really strong grit in there that I love so much, I think most people trying to do that would probably burn out their throat. I mean, it's like the guy was just born to sing. I'm really digging these fills from Lee Kerslake. They are nice and clean. I love the drum sound. The toms are not ringing too much. They hit the attack. You can feel that power in the hit, which is very important. A lot of times toms can be muddy and you really just hear like a bigger boom, but you don't really get the attack. And it's nice and crisp here. Sounds fantastic. And I love what he's playing on top of that. Yeah, this is really cool. I love the power in it. I think that the song is very strong. It really moves along at a good pace. Again, great tempo. They really have structured tempos in their songs so perfectly to match what they're doing. A little bit faster and it would be more metal, a little bit slower and it would be as exciting to listen to. It's like they just nail that right tempo. And I really dig that. Again, we're hearing those transitionary changes, but now we're hearing them in the chorus as we did on the last one that they had teased in one of the earlier parts. And it's cool. It's a little, overdone for me personally, just because that's kind of one of the things that I think you should do maybe once or twice and then leave it at that. Maybe do something different in the middle of that or for the third time. But it definitely works, and it's interesting. It's not just, let's just play the chorus straight, and it adds another dynamic to it. It's a little more progressive. Well, I had been worried that we weren't going to get a guitar solo in this song, but we just got a guitar solo and a damn good one. Really nice feeling, a little bit different style too from Mick on that. I also like that sort of muted strumming that we heard. He had put that in, I think it was the chorus before the solo, or the part before that. I can't remember now. I meant to mention it, but it was a nice fill in there, a different sound, something that works with the song, but really kind of stood out on its own as well. I love when we get surprises like that. I really like that dry sounding snare when you get a fill like that. If it's too reverby, you lose a lot of the dynamics in that. Can't really hear what the drummer's doing. It's just kind of a mess of sound. But that actually sounded really good. I'm glad that they didn't bury the snare in reverb, which is a very common thing to do in music. Well, that's just a great showcasing of what these guys can do vocally. I mean, it isn't enough that they're just great musicians, writers, performers, all of it. But on top of that, they can pull off some really cool vocal parts like that just kind of make you go, wait a minute, I got to hear that again. That was a nice ending. I really like that. Very tight together, very unexpected. And that's the signature of Uriah Heep right there. I want to point out too, because I haven't really talked about this a whole lot, but a lot of times there are effects on the vocals that you really can't specifically hear. I think they just put that little shimmer on the end of his vocal just for that word. It didn't sound to me like it had been through earlier parts of the song, but a lot of times there are choruses, there are reverbs, there are delays that we just don't necessarily hear because they blend in with the music so well. Delays you're more likely to hear. A chorus, you might notice that the voice sounds thicker than normal if it's something that's done out of the norm. If they do it all the time, you probably won't notice it. But reverbs especially, sometimes when I listen to an isolated vocal track, I'm shocked at how much reverb is actually on the voice, because it doesn't sound like that when you hear it with the song. So a lot of times vocal effects just blend in really nicely and you don't particularly notice them. But if they weren't there, you would notice that dry sound, especially with the reverb. And, it's not uncommon for there to be a little bit of chorus on a vocal track. But in any case, sounds fantastic. A great high energy song, nailed the tempo. Great solo, real nice and powerful vocal delivery as always from Bernie. Nice having those keyboards come in, hearing that organ really cut through and add to the just the meat of the song. Just a really good song overall. And I think that's a great song for a Monday show. I hope you guys did too. We'll see you tomorrow for another episode and another song. Cheers. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Uriah Heep, the Magicians Podcast. If you have enjoyed this show, please consider going over to Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast outlet, leaving a rating or a review. Be sure to subscribe to make sure that you are notified when new episodes are available. Please be sure to share this podcast with your fellow Uriah Heep enthusiasts and anyone who you think would like Uriah Heep, which should be everyone. And if you are so inclined, please feel free to contribute to the Patreon account. And if you are not a Patreon subscriber, you can also pay through the PayPal link on the website listed in the show links below. I would also like to thank Uriah Heep for their very generous support of the show. And thank you guys for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Happy days!